Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Heather Ann Ferri, self mastery coach, Guinness World Record holder turned trauma healer, and we'll learn from her about how she overcame her brain injury and generational trauma to guide others towards self love and peace. We'll learn about this and lot more. We'll learn about how one can heal deep trauma and awaken true self. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so honored that you're allowing me to have a voice here. So thank you.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Heather. We'll talk about your India connection, about all that stuff. We'll talk about. So, not only in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about, as I said, healing deep trauma, awakening true self, and lots more from you. We'll learn all that. But before that, let's learn a bit about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are, who they are talking to, who they are listening to.
Sure. Well, I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my parents met in high school. They actually met and they were performing on stage together, and they fell in love and they married pretty young. Back then, we didn't hear much about childhood trauma or mental health advocates or anything like that, but both of my parents came from generational bloodline traumas. And I was born, and roughly around 7 years old is when things started to change in the household. My father came home one day, very depressed and sad, sitting at the kitchen table and voicing how he got fired from his job when he worked with the family business. So his father fired him. And so that started a turmoil of uncertainty in the household in regards to money and family. And then the next year, my mother switched mental states and began coming into my bedroom in the morning when nobody was home before school, because my brother was already at school. And she would attack me from behind, almost choking me to death. And this began the story of severe childhood abuse. I had brain damage and health issues. I was scared. I was living in a household with two people that started out as mom and dad and became other types of energies. And so my mom, being a narcissist, some would say borderline psychopath, loved to dance in the theater arts. And so I was thrown into the theater arts. And in some ways, that was an amazing healing tool. It was an amazing outlet for me to sing and dance and to be in a safe environment. But in other ways, there was a lot of self-development that didn't occur. I didn't have a normal childhood. I didn't play with other kids. I didn't have school activities. I was just focused on this career. Because my mom sort of liked the idea of the attention when I got awards. So my awards were about how great she was. And I was kind of left it feeling like I'm not loved. I have all this, health issues. So fast forward, I go to Point Park University and I study the theater arts. It was a great healing environment. When you study with dance teachers and acting teachers, it is a little like therapy, because you're exploring human nature, psychology, how people interact with each other. And then I moved to New York City, which started my show business career, where, like you said, I have a world record. The interesting story behind the world record is that as a child, I became obsessed with turning on one foot with tap shoes on. And that obsession was actually kind of giving me a high to balance out the pain in my brain. So I feel like children are very resourceful, and they hide their gifts. And one of my gifts in my coaching, whether you're an accountant, a scientist, a doctor, is to unravel those gifts that were buried, that you don't even know exist, that can help you in your personal and professional life. So I was obsessed with turning, and eventually I kept hearing people in New York City say, you should create a world record. And I thought to myself, what? And then they kept saying, you should create a world record. And then finally, after hearing it over and over again, I met with the New York Foundation for the Arts. They tape recorded it, and I created a world record for turning. And then that started my journey into the tap dancing, show business, creating musicals world. In my 30s, I decided to move back home after I started studying yoga and meditation. I wanted to face why I ran away from home in the first place. And coming back to Pittsburgh, PA, started my journey into a trauma coaching, trauma career, learning all these ancient sciences, dealing with family, leaving family system, going back into the family system, leaving the family system again, and really coming out of it at this point in my life in my 50s and saying, wow, like I love myself. I'm healthier than I've ever been before. I've been able to reverse a lot of things. And I want to inspire people that through self mastery of these sciences, you're going to learn how to be your own healer. You're going to learn how to be your own teacher because I think it's always innately in us. So that just gives you a little taste of the journey.
Absolutely. But what is it that led to, from being a world record holder to losing your ability to walk? And that's very, difficult to digest.
That's a great question. So I'm roughly about 39 years old at the time. So I created my world record when I was roughly around 26 years old. So I'm back in Pittsburgh, PA, and I start getting pain for no reason in my left ankle, shin. Go to traditional route for about 6 to 7 months, physical therapy. The pain's getting worse. It's getting worse. And I'm starting to lose the ability to walk. And through that journey, I was sick for actually 2 years. And I tried a lot of things. And that's why I know I kind of I'm very opinionated about how to heal trauma because I tried so much. And then I found stuff that really works. So it's kind of like that experiment, that mad scientist. But what happened was a very serious ego death that happens when people face sickness or hardships because my whole identity was around, I am strong. Look at me. But on the inside, I was dying. And so it was an ego death, which then allowed the spiritual awakening that you are more than your credentials, that you are more than your titles, that you are more. And that's where I had to start healing that inner child to have self-love, which is wealth. I mean, self-love is wealth. I've watched a lot of million billionaires pass away, unfortunately, younger than they should, 50, 60 years old, knowing that they had a lot of childhood trauma and did not really want to step into that work because it's painful. It's not fun, But like I said, being your own healer, your teacher, that's what it's going to take in order for you. And so God, goddess, whatever you believe in, stopped me in my tracks because I was a workaholic. I was a sugar addict and I was not going to stop on my own. So literally I could not walk and it was a humbling experience. And it took me a long time to get the trauma out of my body, tissues, and rewire my brain. But I'm grateful that I actually did it. I think it's my dance career and that self-discipline that allowed me to say, okay, I will try something for 3 months. And if I don't see results, I'm moving on to another science. And that's kind of how I worked. I'll give it a chance. But after 3 months, if I'm not seeing a certain amount of results, I'm going to throw that science out and I'm going to grab another science. And that's kind of how I got to this point right now. So, yeah.
Right. So how did you become a transformational coach, self-mastery coach?
I didn't plan on it. So right there, I mean, I was certified in Kundalini yoga, teaching meditation, teaching a lot of workshops and classes. And then a student came up to me and said, do you do private coaching? And I thought to myself, no, but I saw so many different issues in the classroom and I was kind of getting frustrated because there is a beautiful thing with private coaching. So I started private coaching and I have to say, a lot of my beginner students are the students that came to me. I had psychologists and doctors and scientists coming to me, which was wild back then. They were teaching me just as much as I was teaching them, because they said, this didn't work for me. Okay, so I write that down in my notes. Okay, we're going to try this. And so that's kind of, they are a part of my healing process and sort of how I formulated all these protocols. But I have to go back to my parents, blue collar workers in Pittsburgh, PA. They didn't grow up with any self-care or self-love or any of that stuff, but they did invest, and we didn't have a lot of money, but they did invest me in private training. And I always tell people there is a difference in having a private coach for a month instead of taking a class. They're both beneficial by far. But when I was training as a dancer privately, we can really get into those subtle details to make me a world record holder, right? And so when people are hiring me privately, I have 8 scientists to pick from. I'm not just picking one. I got to formulate what you need. And so there's a formulation to this, a dance that we create together, because you have to do some work too. It's a dance, the teacher and the student. So, so I kind of fell into it, and I think it was partly to heal myself.
Absolutely. And before I come to other questions, let's understand your connection with India. You talk about lessons from India. Help us understand about that.
Yes. So while I was in New York City, I unfortunately experienced watching Tower 2 go down during 9/11. So like everybody else in New York City, it was very quiet for a couple months, and everybody was sort of lost. And we started asking the question, why did this happen? What's my purpose in life? Why am I here? These very important spiritual questions. And I kept waking up in the morning and hearing this voice. Some can call that the divine mother, your ancestors, that I was going to work in India. And I would laugh like, yeah, right. And then the next morning, you're going to work in India. Well, I believe that something much greater and higher that's good was preparing me for the phone call. So I get a random phone call, which we know isn't random. And I was referred for a job choreographing with the Billy Graham Association. And it required flying to India and staying there for 6 weeks. Well, at that time, a lot of people didn't want to fly. So I think being prepared let me know that I'm supposed to do this no matter what, even if it may appear dangerous. And there were family members that were like, I don't know why you would be flying right now, but I knew that I had to go. And thank God I did. Thank God I did. I will say this about that. There's a couple of really deep lessons, and I write that in a new book coming out later this year. But one of the spiritual lessons is, because it was the Billy Graham Association, I was at the time no religion. I was studying Buddhism, and I was just very neutral. Because of my mother's sort of real hard ties to religion and all this guilt and stuff that she would use manipulation with me, I just really didn't want to be a part of that world. So I just assumed they wouldn't hire me. And when they asked me if I was a Christian and I said no, I said, I'm studying Buddhism, I just assumed you're not going to get the job. So I was actually surprised they hired me. And then when I was with the directors and the crew there, it was one of the most neutral, loving experiences I had. Very open-minded conversations. I think back then at that moment, everybody was questioning everything, which I think is important at times. With traumas, you got to ask questions. You got to search. And so I believe India being there was the activation of my spirituality, of my past lives, of a bigger purpose that I was going to use later in life. Because as I learned about my past lives, I learned that I was, you could call a saint or a higher conscious being in India at one time in a past life with my father, where I would go to different villages and work with the families and stuff. So I have, even in Pittsburgh, PA, India people love me. It's just, they'll invite me to dinner. Literally, they won't know who I am. And they'll literally say, come on in, let's have a meal. And I love it because the food is their gift. They really cherish giving quality of food and quality of time, which I feel American family systems need more of. And we can learn from that culture and how much they cherished that. So, yeah, I have a big, deep love for India.
Absolutely, absolutely. Heather, thank you for that. Now, to understand about things, what is it that you are trying to do with all the things that you are doing? What is it? You talk about, self love, you talk about peace, you talk about inner child, you talk about awakening true self. Help us understand from that angle what is it that you want to do for people? What is it that you want to achieve in terms of what you have set out to achieve?
Okay, so two folds on that. First fold is when the student's ready, the teacher arrives. The students that came to me had all kinds of labels, doctors, scientists, you name it. But what I learned after about 4 or 5 sessions is I was sitting across from a wounded child. And so that became a common theme, something that nobody wants to talk about. People want to fluff over. But it was a reality thing. That inner child needs attention. Maybe they didn't get the mom or the fatherly, so they have to become that for themselves. One thing I'm very proud of with my coaching and teaching is independence. Because I kind of grew up in a kind of dictatory household, I find that people who are victims or weak or having tough times tend to be sucked into programs that give over their power. We want to be very careful of not giving over your power. So I think the great thing of having several ancient sciences, which you could see on my website, and we could definitely have a deeper conversation on what that is that I'm not coming from it from one angle. And if I don't have the answer, I'm going to refer it out. Okay. The benefits of teaching specifically business owners and leaders right now is we need leaders to have a more healthy inner state of consciousness so that they are not building on businesses that are building products that are killing America. Like, we have a lot of toxic food and toxic water now. We have toxic products that they're consciously aware that their products matter to the consumer. I want to help leaders when they heal more of their generational traumas, then they understand that there's karma. There's a legacy you leave even when you go away that matters. And we are in a we're going to the roots in America right now. And there's a lot of trauma, and I don't take sides with it because actually my mom, even though she's not in my life, I love her unconditionally. She brought me to this earth, and she has taught me so much about the negative side. You have to have both sides. You have to understand both sides to understand how to heal it. Now, it's her choice. I've given her actually some toolkits to heal it. I can't do that work for her. It's the same with leadership. So right now I'm redirecting into working with organizations, nonprofits to teach staff. Instead of just teaching the victim, let's get the staff upgraded more. Let's get the staff being able to focus and have more intuition, have more energy, so that and money's a big deal at this point. Money's energy. So we need to be able to financially invest in leaders that are investing back into our communities, and we need to question what that is. So I'm kind of going on a deeper leadership right now position because of all of my clients who were my gifts. Because I have to be honest with you, I had clients with PhDs and papers that, I don't have that. But what I do have is experiences from this life and past lives and wisdom that they were able to surrender their ego and say, something's not working in my life. And then they were able to say, something's not working in my business life. And so we need more of those interconnections as we heal the inner child.
Absolutely. And talking of inner child trauma, and you also talk about generational trauma. Where does one begin? Should I go to my childhood, or should I go to my, other generations and beyond that and other births? I want to understand it better. For some people, it can be very confusing where to get started from.
That's a great, great question. So, there are two brain protocols that were game changers for me, and they have PubMed research. They're not mainstream yet, but I hope that my being on these platforms will start that conversation. One is for PTSD, whether you're in war or you're chronic from childhood trauma. And these 8 medical meditations have formulas, finger placements, sound frequency, breath patterns that teach the nervous system to be relaxed. This is a game changer for people to start to be able to sit in silence, to start to be able to have creative ideas about, okay, my relationship's not working right, or I just had a fight with my business partner. But it's also a toolkit. And I want to give you an example of why we need toolkits now. We don't just need Trump. We don't just need coaching programs. We need something we may need 5 years from now. I've had clients 5 or 6 years from now get in a car accident. They pull out the PTSD brain protocol. They do it for 2 days. All their cortisone levels are normal. Their anxiety is normal. The trauma doesn't stay in their body because I also teach them how to involuntary shake. So when I tell you I'm teaching you to be your own healer, I'm teaching you to be on your own healer and teach your whole family. So that's one thing. The childhood brain protocol, it's a little longer, 15 meditation series. There's a brain protocol I had to utilize in the last couple of years called it's for dyslexia. My father had dyslexia. I assumed I didn't have dyslexia. But what I've coined now, because I kept hearing, you need to do this meditation. And honestly, I'm going to be honest with you. I was a little like, I don't need to do this. I don't have dyslexia, right? Well, I have emotional dyslexia. That happens through different types of abuse as a child. And so I started doing it 11 minutes every day. And I started to see a difference in how I was feeling with the people I was interacting with. So if people are emotionally triggered a lot, it may be emotional dyslexia. What happens in the childhood brain protocol, and I didn't know this, nobody taught me this, is this happened 10 years ago. I was sitting across from a psychologist, and as they were doing one of the meditations, they started to realize their health issues was from a past life. And they had all the information. So I didn't give it to them. I watched it like a movie. And it was really cool to see. I almost wish I had a camera. I was like, nobody's going to ever believe this. But it was teaching me that as I kept doing the childhood brain protocol, all the information is inside you. Don't actually need somebody else. And I kind of steer away from somebody else telling you that information because that's their perspective. I would rather give you a toolkit where you practice it and you eventually it's in, and I may validate something or listen to it or like that's really resonant because I am a psychic medium, but I don't call myself that because I don't want people to be codependent on me. We have a codependent society. We need people to have tools that last and we pass them on to our children generation to generation. So the past life regression thing really became strong for me in the last couple years, but it was something I fluffed over for many years because I was watching friends who had these information, but it wasn't making any sense in helping them in their life. So what good's it if I know I was a saint in India if it's not helping my life right now? The idea that I was in India and the idea that these brain protocols, I believe, started in India, they're Sanskrit. So there is a root to that connection there, makes sense. And it also makes sense of how, like, I didn't end up on the dark side from being in such a dark environment growing up as a child because my soul database doesn't have the same past lives as my mom's, right? So there is still a disconnect, even though I chose her and my dad to come in to play out to be at this moment right now.
Absolutely. And what about inner peace? Where you, because inner peace is a very wide term. A lot of people will find that peace in one thing or the other. Somebody will find peace in troubling others. Somebody will find peace in rescuing others. I want to understand, how do you want people to understand about peace? What does it look like?
So inner peace for me is something I've just started experiencing in the last year. because I've been able to release the trauma out of my body. So I'm anti-aging. So if you saw pictures of me even 5 years ago, I look a lot older and I walked a lot older. Inner peace to me is a knowing of myself, is a knowing that I chose myself over exterior things like materialism or relationships that weren't superficial. I chose to heal thyself, to know thyself, I think brings the most inner peace. To sit, when I first started meditation, when I was 25 years old, I couldn't sit still because I had so much anxiety and trauma. The idea of doing 11-minute meditation was daunting to me, but I kept going back to class because of my dance training, discipline. And so for me to be able to sit under a tree and not think about anything for hours is peace. That's peace. So how people define their inner peace is going to vary, but I do think you need to define it. And if you don't have inner peace, you need to ask the questions, why? Because everyone deserves inner peace.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, there is much to learn from you about all this. How does one get started with this? Means I, as an individual, cannot go back to my childhood. I obviously do not want to go back to my past life because that can be difficult, and I may not come back from that past life. Many people might think that way. How do I then get started? What are the tools? And I'm a simple person. I'm not a very educated person. I'm a very simple person. I'm not a rich person. I do not want to take many risks. What is your advice on that?
So for me, I always tell people go onto my website, read the pages. If something resonates in the connection of my energy, then contact me. And we can either put you into a group class or a private class if you want to explore healing. Everybody, so how do I put this? I've had amazing teachers in dance, and they live inside of me forever. I've had some amazing teachers as Reiki masters. They live inside of me forever. I remember working with a doctor in New York City who had a massive stroke. And she said, you know what? When I sit with you on Zoom, it's just easier. It's just easier. You got a cheerleader. You got somebody that's been through it and has a little bit more energy and light to boost you up on those days. And sometimes you're so hard on yourself. She would be so hard. She'd be like, I didn't do my homework this week. And I'd be like, that's okay. You showed up today and we're going to do something today. So that's all I can say as far as the realistic aspect of healing. One thing that's very beneficial for anybody, no matter what, is just learning breathing exercises. And there's a lot of YouTube videos. There's a lot of different types of teachers. The brain protocols have breath patterns because trauma gets stuck in breath patterns and emotions. And that's why doing brain work is different than just like a regular meditation class. But yeah, that's where I would start.
Absolutely. There's much to learn from you, and that is where your books series comes in. Transcending Victim to Victory. Tell us about your book series so that people can benefit from that.
Thank you. That book is going to be coming out at the end of July, but you can actually download for free the first chapter, and there are actual exercises and questions. So after each chapter, there are either medical meditations, and I call medical because they have clinical studies, or spiritual questions. And I've actually designed it so if you have a therapist already, you can go through the books. I have a series, book 1, book 2, book 3. Book 1 deals with self-development. Book two deals with work development. So I go through some of my work challenges of sexual harassment and how I deal with these issues. And then book 3 deals with love development, how I break through the generational marriage patterns to come to divine love. So, but what I've done is present something personal. But then after that, after each chapter, questions, and I'm talking 20 or 30 that you can do with your own therapist or coach or yourself, like I said, and write and explore. And if something comes up that you go, okay, I need a brain protocol or I need somebody to talk to, then you get another resource. Because I do believe in teams. I do believe that there isn't just one teacher, but so sometimes when I'm working with a client, at one point, if it gets to be a lot, I'm like, I think we need to bring in a mental health therapist, to support this work. So yeah, but thank you. I mean, that if you want to get on my mailing list, and also if you're an advocate, a mental health advocate, and you want to support the book launch, as a small business owner, I can always use that help. So if this is something that you feel a mission or driven to when you go on my website, let's have a conversation. And the best way is to email me on my contact form at heatherannferri.com.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.